Hello, friends, and welcome back. This isn't just a story, it's a comparison. Today, we're comparing 3 real internet stories about boundaries and what happens when people decide they don't matter. One neighbor tried to return a small favor and accidentally erased weeks of careful work. One shared garden turned into a quiet power grab when effort and entitlement collided. And one man thought stealing a little gas was harmless until shortcuts started costing real money. Same problem, different choices, and very different outcomes. Let's see which one handled it best. My neighbor repaid my small favor by scalping my entire lawn right after I'd spent weeks nursing it back to health. A couple of weeks ago, I was out front mowing my lawn after work, doing the usual back and forth passes and mentally congratulating myself for being productive. I take a strange amount of pride in my lawn. It's nothing award-winning, but I put real effort into learning what works, what doesn't, and when to just leave well enough alone. About halfway through, I noticed something odd along the property line. A small triangular patch of my neighbor's lawn had clearly been missed. Everything else on their side was neatly cut, but this one sad little section stood there waving at me like it had been forgotten. My first thought was that their mower probably ran out of gas or died mid-job. It happens, I've been there. So I shut my mower off, walked over, and knocked on their door. A woman answered, friendly enough, and I explained that I'd noticed the mist patch and offered to mow it real quick while I already had the mower out. She smiled, thanked me, and said that'd be great. I figured I'd spend an extra 2 minutes and earn some neighbor karma. I zipped over, cleaned up the mist area, waved, and went back to my own yard feeling like a decent human being. Fast forward a few weeks. During that time, I'd gone into full lawn rehab mode. I'd overseeded, fertilized, watered consistently, and finally hit that sweet spot where the grass starts filling in thick and lush. Bare patches were gone, color was deep green, and even the random weeds didn't bother me. I'm firmly in the camp of if it's green, it counts. For the first time since I moved in, my lawn actually looked like something you'd see in a stock photo. I decided to let it grow a bit longer than usual and enjoy it before doing one final mow in mid-October to put it to bed for winter. That plan lasted exactly 0 days. I came home from work one evening, tired, hungry, and ready to admire my grass like a proud parent. Instead, I pulled into the driveway and immediately knew something was wrong. My lawn looked short. Not uneven, not messy, just aggressively, decisively mowed. I sat there in my car, staring at it, trying to process what my eyes were telling me. Then it hit me. The neighbor. Apparently, after I'd helped with that tiny mist patch weeks earlier, the woman had mentioned it to her husband, and in his mind, the most logical, neighborly, heartfelt way to repay that kindness was to mow my entire lawn while I was at work. Not just a quick trim along the edge, the whole thing. Clean lines, tight passes. The man went all in. And then I noticed something worse. He'd removed the weeds, every single one, which meant that the spots where those weeds had been helping hold soil together were now bare. After weeks of careful seeding and nurturing, I was once again staring at patches of exposed dirt. I didn't even know whether to laugh or scream. I stayed parked in my car for a solid 30 minutes, just sitting there cycling through disbelief, amusement, and a very specific kind of internal pain that only comes from watching someone unknowingly undo your hard work while genuinely trying to be nice. This is the beautifully tragic turning point. All your careful work wiped out in one well-meaning gesture. The worst part is you can't even be mad. He thought he was doing you a huge favor. It's the perfect storm of kindness and catastrophe. To be fair, the lawn looked objectively good. If I hadn't known the backstory, I probably would have been thrilled. The problem was that I knew exactly what stage the grass had been in, how fragile those new roots were, and how badly I'd wanted to let it grow just a bit longer. None of that was information he could have possibly known. From his perspective, he was being an absolute saint. Eventually, once I'd accepted that no amount of glaring from my car was going to regrow the grass, I got out and walked over to his house. I knocked, and he answered with the biggest smile I've ever seen on a man holding a beer. Before I could say anything, he clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, I finally got you back for mowing that spot for us. Figured I'd surprise you." I thanked him, sincerely. I told him the lawn looked great and that I really appreciated the gesture. Inside, a tiny part of my soul curled up into a ball and whimpered, He went on about how satisfying it was to get all the weeds out and how good everything looked now that it was clean. I nodded along like a champion because what else are you supposed to do when someone accidentally helps you to death? By some cosmic coincidence, it started raining as I walked back to my house. Light at first, then heavier. I chose to believe that was the universe doing me a solid, because if anyone had seen my face in that moment, they might have thought I'd just been dumped. I stood inside by the window watching the rain hit my freshly scalped lawn, already calculating how much seed I'd need to fix the bare spots again. The irony wasn't lost on me. I tried to be a good neighbor with a simple, harmless favor, and in return, I'd received an act of kindness so well-intentioned and so catastrophically mistimed that it completely derailed my plan. I couldn't even be mad. The guy didn't trespass, didn't act entitled, didn't complain. He just saw a chance to do something nice and took it. So now I've learned an important, deeply personal lesson. Sometimes kindness comes back to you with a lawnmower and absolutely no awareness of your carefully laid plans. And next time I see a missed patch of grass next door, I'm keeping my head down, my mower moving, and my neighborly instincts firmly in check. This one hurts because nobody was trying to be a problem. The turning point is that moment you realize good intentions can still cause real damage. And our second story. My neighbor decided to take over our side of the shared garden. My partner and I live in a multi-family house with 4 separate units, the kind of place where everyone technically shares space, but no one ever really agrees on how that should work. There's a large backyard behind the house, and at the far end of it sits a 2-sided garden plot that's been there longer than any of us. When we moved in, we were the newest tenants by a wide margin. Everyone else had already settled into their routines, habits, and quiet assumptions about what belonged to whom. Last spring, my partner got really excited about starting a vegetable garden, not just tossing a few seeds in the dirt and hoping for the best, but actually doing it right. Before we touched anything, he went out of his way to talk to one of the other neighbors who actively used the garden. She'd been planting there casually for years, mostly herbs and a few struggling vegetables. We told her we were interested in gardening and asked how she wanted to divide the space. She immediately said she preferred the left side of the garden. No hesitation, no discussion. Fine. My partner agreed and took the right side. What followed was weeks of work. We hauled in fresh soil, compost, plant food, and nutrients. We tilled everything by hand, removed old roots, aerated the dirt, and rebuilt that side of the garden from scratch. It wasn't cheap, and it wasn't easy. There were evenings where we came inside sore, dirty, and exhausted, but proud. By the time planting season really hit, our side of the garden looked incredible. The soil was dark and rich, the beds were neat, and everything we planted actually started growing. Our neighbor's side did not. She reused the old soil, didn't add nutrients, and mostly just poked plants into the ground and hoped they'd survive. When her vegetables struggled and ours thrived, she immediately decided the problem wasn't her approach, it was the sunlight. According to her, our side got way more sun than hers. This was baffling because the 2 sides are separated by roughly a foot. There's no fence, no tree, no shadow line. The sun doesn't magically favor one half of a shared garden plot. But that didn't stop her from complaining about it constantly. She'd make comments whenever she saw us outside. Must be nice having all that sun. Or, yeah, well, some of us don't get the good side. We tried to ignore it. We offered suggestions. We even explained what we'd done with the soil. She brushed it all off. In her mind, the universe had simply decided she deserved worse tomatoes. Winter came, the garden died back, and we assumed that was the end of the drama. We were wrong. This spring we went outside one morning and saw her actively setting up on our side of the garden, stakes in the ground, seed trays lined up, her tools scattered across the soil, weed rebuilt and maintained. At first, I genuinely thought there'd been some kind of misunderstanding. My partner walked over and calmly said, "Hey, what's going on? That's the side we've been using." She didn't even look embarrassed. She told us she decided to switch sides this year because the sunlight was better. Just like that. No discussion, no asking, just a decision she made on our behalf. We told her we weren't okay with that. We reminded her that she was the one who picked her side originally and that we'd spent a significant amount of time and money improving the soil on ours. Her response was that it wasn't fair for us to keep the better side 2 years in a row. When we pointed out that sunlight hadn't changed and the difference was the soil, she accused us of being selfish and hoarding resources. That's when the argument really kicked off. She raised her voice, told us that the garden was shared property and that she could plant wherever she wanted. We told her shared, it didn't mean she could just take over something we had clearly established and invested in. The conversation went in circles until the landlord got involved. His solution was to alternate sides every year, like children trading bedrooms. We said no, not aggressively, not dramatically, just firmly. We weren't refusing to share the garden. We were refusing to give up something we paid for, worked on, and maintained because she regretted her own choices. The landlord seemed annoyed but non-committal, clearly hoping we'd just cave and make his life easier. Instead, we made a different decision. Over the next weekend, we carefully removed every bit of soil we'd brought in, all of it. We filled planters, raised beds, and containers that we set up near our side of the house. We left the garden plot exactly how we found it when we moved in. Tired soil, compacted dirt, and all. Then we told the landlord and the neighbor that she was welcome to use the entire garden space however she liked. Just not our soil. This is perfect. Instead of fighting over the plot, you simply took back what was yours. It wasn't mean or petty, it was fair. She wanted the benefits of your work without doing any herself, and you made sure that couldn't happen. The look on her face was incredible. She didn't yell, she didn't argue, she just stared at the garden, then at the planters, then at us. She clearly understood what had happened and why. There was nothing she could do about it. The landlord couldn't say a word because technically we hadn't broken any rules. We hadn't taken over shared space. We simply removed our personal property. Now she uses both sides of the garden, and somehow, miraculously, her plants still struggle. Meanwhile, our vegetables are thriving right outside our door. She refuses to make eye contact with us and will literally turn her head away if we're in the yard at the same time. It's quiet now, peaceful even. Turns out the problem was never the sunlight. It was the entitlement mixed with a refusal to admit that effort actually matters. The mistake here was assuming shared space meant shared rewards without shared work, and instead of arguing, you quietly removed the advantage she was trying to steal. And our last story. Revenge is a dish best served at a 1-to-5 diesel to gasoline ratio. It started off as a minor irritation, one of those tiny suspicions you brush aside at first, but that keeps poking at the back of your brain like an itch you can't quite reach. I live in a modest end-unit townhouse in a neighborhood that looks like it was designed with a copy-paste tool. Driveways like narrow slivers of concrete separated by low hedges and the illusion of privacy. My neighbor to the right, Dave, late 40s, patchy beard, perpetual stain on his shirt, was a self-declared fix-it guy with more duct tape than actual tools. His beat-up 98 Ford F-150 sounded like someone poured gravel into a dryer and ran it on high. We weren't close, just the usual wave from the driveway kind of neighbors. He was the type who'd corner you while you were grabbing the mail to vent about the damn cost of spark plugs these days or whatever nonsense had him worked up that morning. He always seemed a little bitter, a little broke, a little entitled. The first red flag? One weekend I'd filled up my 5-gallon gas can at the station, big bright red thing, couldn't miss it, and used maybe a gallon mowing my tiny patch of yard. Locked it back up in the shed, which I secured with a cheap combo padlock. The next weekend, I go to finish the job, open the shed, pick up the can, and it feels light, suspiciously light. I paused, tilted it back and forth. No way I burned through that much, I muttered. Maybe I spilled some. Maybe I used more than I thought. It was easy to dismiss, but that little itch got a bit deeper. 2 weeks later, I get smarter. I top off the gas can and mark the levels inside the shed with a tiny strip of duct tape. Nothing obvious, just a faint line on the back. I don't touch it, don't mow, don't move it. And 2 days later when I check, the gas is visibly below the line. At least 2 gallons gone. That was it. That wasn't imagination or memory tricks. Someone was stealing my fuel. And unless raccoons had gotten real organized, it didn't take a detective to figure out who. Dave's junker of a truck guzzled gas like it was still 1999, and he had a habit of warming it up for 10 minutes every morning, revving it like he was heading to a monster truck rally instead of a warehouse job. He'd once griped to me, beer in hand at 10:30 a.m., "Gas prices are criminal, man. Whole system's rigged." Right, the only thing rigged was his plan to mooch off my shed. So I set a trap. I ordered a cheap motion sensor wildlife cam online meant for spotting deer, but just as good for catching Dave in the act. I mounted it inside the shed, aimed it square at the gas can, then I baited it, filled the can at the station, wheeled it into the shed with exaggerated effort, rattled the lock, and made sure Dave saw the whole performance. My inner theater kid was proud. Next morning, I checked the footage, and there he was. Grainy, green-tinted night vision caught him at 1:17 a.m., bathrobe over pajama pants, flip-flops, holding a greasy old jerry can like it was a treasure. He crept up to the shed, jiggled the lock, and with practiced ease, popped the door open. He snatched my gas can, poured it into his own, set it back down, and shuffled away like some suburban raccoon with a diploma in freeloading. Now, I could have confronted him, but what would that do? He'd deny it, maybe say I was mistaken or accuse me of spying on him. Cops wouldn't waste time over a few gallons of gas. I needed something better, something that would make him regret the day he decided to help himself to my fuel. See, I know a bit about engines, just enough to be dangerous, and I know that pouring diesel into a gasoline engine, especially an old, already wheezing one, isn't a fatal blow, but it sure as hell will ruin your week. It gums up the works, doesn't ignite properly, makes the whole system spit and cough until it chokes, and in Dave's truck, it'd be like feeding steak to a blender. So I got to work. Next gas run, I filled the can about 80% with regular unleaded, then I switched pumps and topped it off with diesel. A nasty little cocktail that'd smell wrong, act wrong, and do all the wrong things to his engine. Gave it a slosh, sealed it tight, and set it back in the shed like a lamb waiting for the wolf. It wasn't about violence or yelling. It was about using his own greed against him in a way he'd feel every time his truck coughed. I made sure Dave saw me hauling it back in, even grunted loud enough to draw his attention, locked the shed, still with the janky combo that accidentally popped open with a wiggle, and waited. Sure enough, the next morning, the footage showed him creeping in again, same robe, same dance, lifted the can, stole the bait, walked off with a smug little swagger. Then came the fun part. I was on my porch, coffee in hand, when Dave fired up his truck, or tried to. It coughed, wheezed, chugged like it was trying to remember how to breathe. He revved it, and that's when the smoke started. Not the usual tired blue haze. No, this was thick, white, and rolling. It poured out of the tailpipe in clouds so heavy it looked like a magician was about to emerge. The truck lurched down the road, made it maybe 50 feet, and died with a dramatic sputter. Dave coasted to the curb and popped the hood, looking confused and pissed. I could hear him yelling into his phone something about blown head gasket, and this doesn't make any damn sense. A tow truck showed up an hour later. The driver hooked up the Ford while Dave paced, hands flying in frustration. I heard him say, "Ran fine yesterday. Had a full tank, too." Oh, I bet it did. Over the next week, his truck was MIA. Meanwhile, Dave was reduced to standing at the end of the cul-de-sac, thumbing rides to work. He looked like a kid who missed the bus every morning, grumpy, tired, and full of regrets. Then came the gossip. Gotta love nosy neighbors. Mrs. Callahan from 2 doors down gave me the scoop while watering her petunias. Mechanic said it was some kind of fuel contamination, she said, eyes wide. Had to drain the whole system. Said the plugs were fried to hell and back, cost him nearly $1,200. $1,200, all because he couldn't be bothered to pay for $8 worth of gas. He never said a word to me about it, never mentioned the camera, never even acknowledged the fact that his little racket had come to a very expensive end. He just stopped stealing. After that, the shed stayed untouched. The camera recorded nothing but spiders and dust. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at the truck in the driveway like it had personally betrayed him. He'd frown, rub his temples, and mutter under his breath, and I'd sit on my porch sipping coffee, watching it all unfold with a quiet sense of satisfaction. That's the thing about people like Dave. They think they're clever. They think the world owes them a shortcut, but eventually they learn that even a petty theft can come with a price tag, and sometimes that price is measured in dollars, embarrassment, and a whole lot of diesel smoke. And me, I never had another drop of gas go missing again. Funny how expensive lessons tend to stick. All three stories deal with boundaries, but they enforce them differently. Story 1 shows how even kindness can backfire without communication. Story 2 proves that effort still matters even in shared spaces. Story 3 is about consequences finally matching behavior. Now it's your turn. Which story handled it best? Vote in the comments and tell me why. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a new video every single day. Thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.